The love of the Son given by the Father through the incarnation is then returned from the Son to the Father, creating a special wholeness. Does this wholeness then create the Holy Spirit, or does it simply give to the Holy Spirit? Bless you, Father. This is Stan from St. Louis. So he must have been typing rapidly while you were speaking just moments ago. So how do you unravel what he said in relation to what you said? Are they the same?
Yeah. No, actually, the Father's love of the Son and the Son's love of the Father does not create the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is generated out of the one infinite Godhead itself. So it is like, it's not, I use the analogy of a child, and I probably shouldn't have done that, but the love relationship between the Father and the Son on the one hand and the Holy Spirit on the other, that love relationship is like the love relationship between parents and child, right? So when the child receives that love and gives it back to the Father and the Son, it's like it completes the parents' love for each other, because the parents' love for each other, right, is one thing in itself, but when it's reflected through the eyes of the child, when it's reflected through the eyes of the Spirit, it completes the love of the parents. So the answer to your question, though, is no, it does not create the Holy Spirit. In point of fact, the Holy Spirit is generated out of the one infinite power source. Maybe an easy way to think about it, and then maybe move to the incarnation, which your question implicitly gets to. Easy way to think about it is there's one divine nature, and we talked about why that is, right? You can only have one of them, because if you had two, there'd have to be a difference between the one and the other, and one of them therefore would have to be restricted or finite, which would mean you'd have a restricted, unrestricted entity, which is a contradiction. So you're going to have one and only one divine nature. Number two, because it's unrestricted. Number two, there are two natures that Jesus, right, the self-consciousness of the Son is participating in. So you have Jesus has his self-consciousness, his personhood, his inner subjective domain, and he is participating in the incarnation. He continues to participate in his divine nature, but he's also participating in his human nature at the same time. And we can talk about how that works in the incarnation later on. But for the time being, just think two natures. So the one self-consciousness of God is participating in two natures. Much like, for example, when you're in your dream world, right? And this is an analogy, right? You can't make a strict equivalence. But when you're dreaming, you're in another dream world. It's not the physical world that you are in reality. So your self-consciousness, while you are in bed, right, sleeping or whatever it might be, right, can enter into a whole new other world. Your self-consciousness can. And you can think that that dream world is a real world, such that your self-consciousness has all kinds of feelings, reactions, choices, etc. in dream world. And then for a fleeting moment inside your dream, you can just say, oh, this is not real. When you do that, I mean, it's literally your one self-consciousness is connecting with yourself and the outer world, and let's call it the real world, and in the dream world, both at the same time. So just say one act of self-consciousness can actually participate in two different worlds. A restricted one in the case of Jesus, that would be the incarnate one, and an unrestricted one, his divine one. Then we say that there are three persons in the divine Trinity. And we now just saw, right, that the first self-consciousness was the giver-receiver. He loves and receives the love. Then we have the Son, the receiver-giver, the one who receives, who is beloved, as Jesus calls himself, ha agapetos, as the Father calls him at the baptism and the transfiguration. This is my beloved one, my Son, my beloved one. Ha agapetos mu, ha huios mu, right? The beloved one first, and then he loves the Father. They become a unity. And of course, the Father and the Son then love the third person of the Trinity, the third independent subjective domain, who receives their love and loves them in return. So we say then there's four relations, in the Trinity, right? So we have the Father to the Son to the Father and the Son to the Spirit back to the Father and the Son. One divine nature, two natures in the one person of Christ, three divine persons making use of the one infinite, unrestricted divine nature, and four relations in love of the three divine persons. So 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
kind of easy to remember.
Let me ask you this, Father. Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
You just mentioned it, and I think it relates to some degree the creed, and also relates a little bit to the Orthodox Catholic split, because one of the you always mentioned that it's the Father and the Son to the Spirit. Why isn't there even more versions of that, in the sense of the Spirit to the Son, or the why is it limited the way you described it as only 4?
Well, basically, because of church doctrine. I mean, Origen, for example, who was a very important church father, though not a saint, he had a couple of problems, one of which was subordinationism, where he subordinated the Son to the Father and the Spirit to the Son. Right. He also had some difficulties in the Trinity. But the Orthodox church still views the Trinity as the Spirit of the Father and not the Spirit of the Father and the Son. But we call it, the Spirit is not. First of all, the Spirit doesn't come from the Father and the Son, right? That would be another form of subordinationism, which would be, frankly, heretical. You don't want that. The Spirit is generated separately from all time, right? A personhood, an independent subjective domain, making use of the one infinite power source, the one infinite divine nature from all time, from all eternity. But we say that the Father and the Son love them together, right? Not not just that the Father loves the Spirit independently of the Son. The unity between the Father and the Son in terms of the love relationship is absolutely essential. The analogy of the parent, though it has its limitations, does express how the unity between the Father and the Son goes outside of itself and wants to be completed by that third person receiving their love and reflecting their love back to them. And so that is basically our view. That is what the church has discerned. I know there's all the controversy about Charlemagne and the filioque clause, right? The filioque means and the Son, right? Part of it. But it is based on a very sound theology of love and very much based on the Scriptures. Especially the Gospel of John in the three great discourses. So it would be John chapter 11, also John chapter 12, and John chapter 17. And so all these chapters of John's Gospel, would be very, very relevant to seeing how the Father and the Son together love the Spirit, and the Spirit back to the Father and the Son. Okay. So I'm sorry. I got that wrong. It's not 11. It's John 15, 16, and 17.